Thank you very much for your attention, also to the organizers for organizing this seminar and giving us the opportunity to present our work. Today I'm gonna present you a lab experiment which is mainly designed to study the effects of group identity uncertainty on individual interaction preferences and its repercussion on collective coordination efficiency. So in the previous literatures addressing the effects of group identity on individual decision-making, individuals used to be categorized either as an in-group or as an out-group, depending on whether they belong to the same or to a different group identity. In these previous literatures, we can find evidence on two different types of discrimination. On the one hand, individuals can positively discriminate other individuals from the same group identity, or on the other hand, they can also negatively discriminate individuals from different group identity, which is known as an outgroup derogation pattern of discrimination. However, there are many group identities that rely on beliefs and convictions that cannot be directly observable from individuals' physical traits and therefore might be uncertain. For instance, you can think on religion or political convictions or sexual orientation. So the main purpose of this paper is to study how individuals behave toward other individuals whose identity is uncertain. In particular, we want to look at how willing individuals are to interact with other individuals whose identity is uncertain, and which are the effect of introducing these individuals whose identity is uncertain into the same coordination context where there are also in-group and out-group, and look how it affects to their collective coordination efficiency. To do so, in all experimental sessions, participants play a repeated coordination game known as a neighborhood game. In the neighborhood game, participants simultaneously choose which other participants they want to play with and an effort level to coordinate on. In each round of the neighborhood game, participant payoff depend on how many other participants they interact with and the difference between the own effort level chosen and the minimum effort level chosen by any other participant with whom interacting. Let me say that participants in each round, by sending interaction proposals, create their own interaction group when two participants agree and mutually consent to interact with each other. Importantly, and while deciding, participants in this neighborhood game can observe the whole previous history of the decision. That is, participants can observe which are the interaction and effort decision of the other participants in the previous round. And this is important because by comparing the own and the other's previous effort level chosen, participants in the neighborhood game can assess which are the potential economic incentive for interacting in the future with each of the other participants. So the experiment has one control and two identity treatments. In the control, I replicate the neighborhood game with 24 participants of Rield et al. 2016. And then in the two treatments, I introduce identity and its uncertainty. And also I manipulate group identity saliency. In the weak identity treatment, before playing the neighborhood game, participants are induced an artificial group identity. And then we do it by following the minimum sense paradigm procedure of inducing artificial group identities. And then in the strong identity treatment, we use the same procedure of group identity inducement, but also before playing the neighborhood game, participants have to develop a common group solved task that requires communication and full interdependence in payoff in order to make the group identity as salient as possible. In the neighborhood game played by participants in the control treatment, there is no identity connotation, but in the neighborhood game played by participants in either the weak or the strong identity treatment, we introduce group identity and its uncertainty using a three-group frame. So let me extend a little bit more on how we implement the three-group frame into the neighborhood game. So basically, in each of the identity treatment sessions, we establish three different participant sets of each 8 participants each. Sorry, there are 24 participants in each of the experimental sessions. And we induce with a green color group identity participants in the first and in the third set, whereas we induce with blue group identity participants in the second set. And what previous literatures tell us is how, for instance, in this context, a participant in the first set who is green will behave toward the other participants in the first set who are also green and are his or her in-group, and how this participant will behave toward the participants in the second set who are blue and therefore are out groups. But by implementing the three-group frame, now we can study how this participant will behave also toward the other participants whose identity remains non-observable and therefore uncertain. So using the three-group frame, now we have decisions towards in-group, out-group, and unknown group for each single participant. And the same happens with participants in the second set. They also have to decide in regards to in-group, out-group, and unknown group. And the same happens for participants in the third set. So to clarify a bit more about how we put everything together in the neighborhood game, let me show you a screenshot example of a participant either in the weak or in the strong identity treatment. Sorry, I know it's in Spanish. We run the experiment in Spanish, but I think words are not too complicated. So first of all, we have here two different screen sections. We have the history section and the decision section. In the decision section is where participants each round decide whether want to interact or not with each of the other participants in the experimental session. And in this case, we are in the screen of a participant who has been induced with a green group identity. And this participant can observe who are the other green participants in the experimental session, who are the other blue participants, and who are the participants whose experimental code is displayed in black in the decision section. And each participant knows that the other participants whose experimental code is displayed in black had been either induced a blue or green group identity, but they do not know which one nor the probabilities they had been induced one or the other. And let me say too that in the control treatment, the only difference is that all the experimental codes referring to participants in the decision section are displayed in black and have no identity connotation. Then at the bottom of the decision section is where individuals or participants have to choose a number, or which we mentioned, we said the effort level. So in the history section is where participants can observe the whole previous history. So here, for instance, we are looking at what happened in round 2. We have a circle of circles. Each small circle refers to one of the participants in the experimental session. The number within the circle is the effort level chosen for each participant in that round. And then we can see the interaction proposals of each participant. Within this circle of circles, we have two different types of line. We have thick lines connecting two different circles. This means that these two participants effectively interact on that round, whereas the incomplete lines that starts at the inside of one circle and points to another circle shows that the participant from where the line starts is proposing an interaction to another participant who do not reciprocate, and therefore the interaction is not established on this round. So at the bottom of the history section, there are 3 different buttons that participants can use to navigate through all the previous rounds. They can move to a previous round, to a next round, or push the button in the right side, which will directly they will to jump to the most recent previous round. So now let me show you the results. I will start by showing you the overall results on effort and interaction measures in the treatments, and then I will show you the results on the effects of group identity on interaction preferences. So first, let me start by showing you this 4 graph. Here, I've included the results or the effort and interaction frequency measures obtained in the neighborhood game of Rielt et al. 2016 that I'm replicating in my control treatment. So the solid blue lines shows the average efforts. The dash blue line shows the average minimum efforts on interaction groups, and the orange line shows the interaction frequencies, everything throughout rounds. And then we also have the variable of waste effort, which is this bluish area that you can see in between the average effort and the average minimum efforts. This is a variable that captures how efficiently interaction groups or participants coordinate. So the first thing that we can observe here is that we do not find any significant difference on any measure between the control and weak identity treatment. When we look at the strong identity treatment, we can observe that both the average effort and the average minimum effort are significantly higher than in the control and in the weak identity treatment, and also that the bluish area is significantly smaller too than in the control and weak identity treatment. This means that participants in the strong identity treatment efficiently coordinate more often than in the control and in the weak identity treatment. But if we want to look at how much or how many interactions groups fully efficiently coordinate, that is, how many interaction groups efficiently coordinate at the highest effort level, we observe that in this percentage is almost 67% in the strong identity treatment, whereas it does not reach the 30% neither in the control or in the weak identity treatment. So this shows that most of the times that interaction groups efficiently coordinate in the strong identity treatment, they do at the highest effort level. So now let me move to the results on the effects of group identity and its uncertainty on interaction preferences. I'm going to show you first what happened in the first round of the neighborhood game, because in the first round of the neighborhood game, participants have to decide with which other participants to interact with without any previous reference of effort or interaction decisions. So in this round, we can isolate the effects of group identity saliency on individual interaction preferences. So here we can observe when comparing the interaction frequencies in the control treatment with the interaction frequencies in the other treatment, in the identity treatments by group identity categorization, that the greatest difference occurs with the interaction frequencies among outgroup participants in both identity treatments. And this suggests that initial interaction preferences exhibit mostly a negative discrimination pattern toward the outgroups. Bit surprisingly, we do not observe big differences between the interaction frequencies among outgroup in the weak and the strong identity treatment, and the same happens for the interactions among in-group participants. And I say this is quite surprising because in the previous literatures, a result that is commonly found is that when we increase group identity saliency, the intergroup bias used to increase. And here we do not observe that the interaction frequency among in-group increase significantly in the strong identity treatment, nor the interaction frequency of outgroups significantly decrease as compared to in the weak identity treatment. But if we look at the interaction frequencies among unknown groups, we can observe that the interaction frequency among unknown groups in the strong identity treatment is around 10% higher than in the weak identity treatment. And this difference is statistically significant. So this suggests that when we reinforce group identity in our context, individuals might strongly discriminate not by interacting more with the in-groups or interacting less with the out-groups, but by interacting more often with the unknown group individuals. So last thing I want to mention here is that in both identity treatments, the interaction frequency among unknown groups fall in between the in-group, the interaction frequency among in-group and out-group participants. So therefore, I conclude that initially, unknown group participants are less negatively discriminated than the out-group participants. Let me move now to show you what happened after the first round. Here you have a regression table in which there are, let's say, two different sets of variables. We have a first set of variables that captures the previous effort decisions of participants. So we use them to talk about the potential economic incentive for interacting. And then we have the second set of variables denoting the treatment and the group identity categorization. So here we can observe that the variable effort gap, which refers to the difference in the previous effort level chosen by each pair of participants, has a negative effect. So that is that once, if participants previously chose different effort levels, their subsequent interaction frequency decrease. And we can observe also that once participants previously chose the same effort level, its subsequent interaction frequency rate increased by almost 34%. And when we interact the variables of no effort gap with the own effort variable, we observe that for each additional effort level, being both participants choosing the same effort level, their subsequent interaction frequency rate increased by almost 14%. So when looking at the second set of variables, we only observe that the interaction between the weak and out group variable is significantly negative, and the weak and unknown group variable is also significantly negative. But the interesting thing here is that the coefficients of the weak and unknown group variable is more negative than the coefficients of the weak and out group variable, which suggests that after the first instance, unknown group participants become more negatively discriminated than out-group participants. So the result that we saw from the first round reversed in the long term. And also surprisingly, we do not find any discrimination pattern in the strong identity treatment. And let's see if I can tell you something about why participants did not discriminate each other by group identity in the strong identity treatment. So here in the right side graph, there is a graph in which gray shadows depicts the average frequency of each of the effort levels in the neighborhood game. And then in the left side graph, we can observe the interaction frequencies in the control treatment and in the identity treatments by group identity categorization. So here, what I want to show you is that after round 5, more than 90% of participants in the strong identity treatment choose the effort level of 7. And when we look at the left side graph, we can observe that differences on interaction frequencies by group identity categorization in the strong identity treatment almost disappear a bit later the round 5, which suggests that once participants choose the effort level of 7, and therefore their potential economic incentive for interacting becomes high and mutual, participants stop discriminating each other by group identities. But if this was true, it should also happen in the weak identity treatment. So now here I show you 2 different graphs again, in which there are depicted the interaction frequencies by different effort gap, previous effort gap levels. So -6 depicts the interaction frequency between participants who previously chose the effort level of 7 and 1. And then when the effort gap becomes 0, this means that these 2 participants previously chose the same effort level. And here I depict separately the cases in which participants previously choose the effort level of 7. This is the last point on the x-axis of each graph. And we can observe that when there is an effort gap of 0, because of participants previously chose the effort level of 7, interaction frequencies by group identity categorization are very similar in both in the strong and in the weak identity treatment. And that's the reason why I conclude that economic incentive can act as a deterring factor of discrimination patterns. So to conclude, let me just mention some things that we can learn from this experiment. The first one is that when we reinforce group identity through a cooperative group solving task, individuals' willingness to provide high efforts to coordinate with others increase, and this contributes to coordination efficiency later on, since the potential economic incentive for those who are not choosing the higher effort levels increase, and therefore they increase their effort levels. Second, that group identity uncertainty deters interaction among individuals, especially in the long term, when interactions among unknown groups are even less frequent than among outgroup individuals. And finally, that a high economic incentive can deter discriminations to interact among individuals. So that's all. Thank you very much.